go back to the, yep, way back. So this one. If you go back to the benevolence and universalism, oh look what you've got, protecting the environment. So even if you don't talk about that, you talk about the values around it, you will seems to stimulate that. So, okay. So you can also add to these definitions I gave you earlier. The values are dynamically related to each other, and that repeated engagement seems to strengthen them. Again, it's the value, the Russell's metaphor. So this is just a nice representation of how it works. So it seems that if I tap these values, what happens is these ones become suppressed, and also these ones become have a bleed over effect. So it's the seesaw effect and bleed over effect. Okay, so that's values. And I just want to show you a little bit of the evidence that we're not just saying, oh, we seem to like those values, they seem to be useful to us because they're similar to our issues. There seems to be a fairly strong correlation between those values and the behaviours that we want to see. So, go to the next one. So, people who have, who show high levels of what's called dispositional self-enhancement values, those things, achievements and power, have been shown to be less empathetic, more Machiavellian, they have higher social governance orientation, they have higher levels of racial and ethnic prejudice, higher levels of antisocial behaviour, and they're less cooperative and more competitive. I don't want these people at my dinner party. You know what I mean? That's good, sorry. But that value set translates into behaviours that I think we can all see are not compatible with the aims of our organisations. Okay? And this works not only at an individual level, but it seems to become correlated at a national level as well. So what Tim Cass has recently done, he took 20 wealthy nations, and you can map the values of a nation, and he controlled the GDP, and he found that where there were higher self-enhancement values, they had higher CO2 emissions, they demonstrated less child well-being, they gave less maternity leave, and there was more advertising for children. So there's a correlation at a national level on this value set. Frames. How am I doing for time? Are we running over massively?
We have 15 minutes.
Code, frames. So here's where we get to making sure that we're not slipping into that thinking about frames as a verb. If you think about a frame, the human brain does not, and I think you all know this, as soon as you start thinking about this, it becomes self-evident. The human brain does not act through dictionary definition, pure use of rational information. If I say the word a to you, you don't have the Oxford English Dictionary definition of the A troll through your mind. You have a whole collection of things happening. You have a chunk of knowledge, a chunk of information appear to you. And they are not only factual, they tell you what A is, but they are procedural, automatically. You can't help it. It's not up to you. If I say the word A, I'm sorry, I'm in control of your brain at that point, you will have that frame activated. You can't stop it. George Lakoff, who's a big guy in the States who's done a lot of work on this, wrote a book called Don't Think of an Elephant. Because he said, you know, if I say don't think of an elephant, it's physically impossible for you not to think of an elephant. You can't negate a phrase just by putting a don't on the beginning of it. So it sparks up in your head. And it's procedural. So let's give another example. If I say the word restaurant to you, now you've got restaurant in your head, it tells you how a restaurant works, not just what a restaurant is. So you know that the process in a restaurant, you go in, you sit down, you get sit down by the waiter, they give you the menu, you have your meal, you have your dinner, you have your afternoon mints and your coffee, and you get your bed and you leave. If you walked into the restaurant and they gave you the bill straight away, you wouldn't need to think. There would be no rational process going on. You wouldn't be going to stand, oh, this feels wrong. It would just feel wrong because it's broken your frame of what you know a restaurant is, how a restaurant works. So it's procedural and it's factual. And frames are in dialogue all the time with your values. So frames is how your brain is working, and values is what it's kind of the rudder of the base of it, kind of helping make decisions and understand things. So this is just a nice little representation. All the things that are captured within a frame, for every word you know. The point about this sort of thinking is whether you think about this when you're constructing your comms or not, you're using it. You can't, this is how the language works. So either you you use your language kind of with only half the knowledge of what it's doing, or you try to understand all of it. But whichever way you go, you're doing an awful lot more than transmitting chunks of rational information. So you've got associated knowledge. So frames, they shape our thinking and our responses. If your procedural frame for a restaurant is somewhere where good food is served and it's always clean and nice, if you walk into a restaurant and it's filthy and it's dirty and it breaks your frame for what you accept in a restaurant, you'll leave. So again, it probably doesn't require an awful lot of rational thought. So it shapes your thinking and your responses. Every single word evokes a frame. It's how the brain works. I don't think of an elephant example, but you can't negate a frame just by saying, please don't think of. And this comes into stark relief when we think about how we tackle the concept of corruption in our communications. And it would suggest that, in the UK, actually the first meeting that got me thinking about all this stuff was a meeting in DEEEP. And DEEEP's latest polling research come out, and it said 52% of the UK public think that corruption is the biggest thing that is standing in the way of aid. I know, let's get all the NGOs together and do a positive campaign about corruption. If that will do it. And there was you wanted to start strangling people because it felt instinctively to me that was exactly the wrong response. And that's because of the frames thing. You can't, when something is that dominant in the frame of aid, it is almost impossible not to reinforce it by talking about it. So you have to make a strategic decision whether you're trying to change the frame or you're trying to take it away. But if you are, then probably the worst thing to do is just keep repeating it, keep activating that in people's heads. So one of the reasons I like the phrase is because it helped explain to me why I had those very, very kind of semi-violent reactions to people coming up with some of these strategies. And like values, frames are reinforced through use. So the more you use a frame, the more it becomes. So the more you talk about the word corruption and the word aid in the sentence, the stronger that connection will become. Okay. So, and they're really, really powerful things. I just want to talk about this one. These are examples of some of the framing that's used and what's applied. Tax relief versus tax cut. This is a very specifically constructed frame that the American writers use to talk about tax relief. And unless you stop and think about it, you don't realise how very, very clever that is. Because if you think about the word relief, and you think about the word tax, there has to be a degree of cognitive fit for them to work together as an idea. And the fit that's required is to believe that tax is bad. Because only, what do you get relief from? You never get relief from good things. You only get relief from bad things. Doctors bring you relief. The people who bring you relief are good people. Contained within those two words is the conservative economic model. Tax is bad. And those people who take it away are good. Versus tax cut. If you talk about tax cut, then you're in a different area, and there's no implication that tax is good or bad, it's just saying right now we're cutting tax. So it's phenomenally clever and phenomenally powerful. And the Republicans in the States have been using this sort of thinking for decades. It's the reason why if you watch a Republican campaign and you watch a Democrat campaign, until very recently, they were very different styles. I don't know who was watching when Bush 2 was doing his campaigns. He was derided in the left-wing press for being repetitive and boring and had kind of one thought. He was always putting one thought. What I didn't think about was the fact that he was doing that because he was trying to instill a frame. And the way you instill them is by repeating them and using them and using them and using them.